statements across the political spectrum. I think most prominently from former presidents, where we heard from President George W. Bush, who said that Laura and I are grateful that President Trump is safe following the cowardly attack on his life. He commends the Secret Service, obviously, as somebody who was also protected by the Secret Service. We heard a similar statement from Barack and Michelle Obama, similar statement from Bill and Hillary Clinton. We've heard statements from the president's allies and from his political opponents, all saying that violence has absolutely no place in American politics, uniformly condemning this. But I have to also say we are starting to hear some very unfortunate signs of efforts to politicize this horrific event.
That's right. Like we noted before, this will be a big test to see how the country responds, politically and in living rooms and workplaces across this country. John, thank you so much. I do want to hear from another person who was there at the event, witnessed the gunfire. Rico Elmore is joining us now. Rico, if you can hear me, just tell us where you were when you first heard the shots.
Thank you so much, and also for the respect that my prayers go out to the family when it all occurred. I know it very well. So I was positioned probably about maybe 20 feet away from President at the point Child was making an address. So the first stage, due to me being I was a speaker at the event. So I did my speech earlier today. During the pre-program, I was a few feet from where this all occurred. We heard the shots, and I thought it was first of all fireworks because people are on edge, and any kind of loud boom you hear, it does have to do, especially because of the environment of what was going on. And I turned around, and someone yelled medic. And I looked, and there was no way the medic could have got to that person in time. So I left my seat, took my tie off, I jumped over the barrier, and I ran into the individual. But when I got there, it was too late. The person was bleeding out from their head. And I said, once again, respect to the family, because this is a very tough time. But they were shot, and I tried to, block the move. I held a towel against it, and until medical team arrived, they got him out, and from there I helped the police and crowd control with getting people out of there because people were very nervous, we were very hesitant, and we had to move people fast and get them into a safe location. Opposite where the shooter was at, or such as he had. So I said we were getting people down and getting people out. I try to keep kids calm and get people clear.
Wow, Rico. Obviously, we want to be sensitive to the victim's family. Can you tell us more about this person? Where they were? Was it a man? Was it a woman?
Well, it was a male. It was a male victim. He was literally just sitting there in the stands. He had to be maybe 3 or 4 rows up from the bottom of the bleachers where he was sitting. And 1 second, everyone was cheering and happy. 1 second, Trump saying, and next minute, he's gone.
Rico, did you have any training in this sort of like first aid? I mean, this is life-saving aid that you're describing here.
I mean, I'm in the military. I'm in the 171st Air Recruiting Wing, and we learn first aid and self-aid body care and basic training. And at the point, as soon as I heard the shots and I seen and heard someone yell medic, my first aid was, I'm trained in self-aid. I'm trained in applying a tourniquet, but I'm not trained to see someone's, what I witnessed.
I mean, nobody can be trained for that, and we're getting a sense, Rico, not just from you, but from others, I think there's going to be some serious time, some healing that's going to need to take place for the people who were there and saw all of this, and especially for you to see everything up close. And you got the sense early on that that this person was lost.
From understanding head moves and how they operate, when I seen what I seen, I was afraid that that person was lost. And reading what has been done, said in the news so far, those are not facts, which is a shame.
Rico, I don't even know if these are the right words to ask this question, because most people have never been in this situation, but how are you processing what you saw and what you witnessed?
I mean, one can only process what happened, hopefully as slow as possible. But my worry, my heart at this point in time is not for myself, but for the families of other loved ones.
Rico, thank you again for your time, and I'm sure the family is grateful, at least at your efforts, that you jumped in and you did everything you could to help out. And of course, our hearts go out to all the victims and you as well. We're thankful that you're okay and able to share your story. Thank you very much tonight.
Thank you.
Again, that's one of the many witness accounts that we've received from Rico Elmore there. Really horrific in how this played out. These terrifying and chaotic moments that people described for us. And it went from jubilant people in the crowd, eager to hear from the former president, to within a matter of seconds, the pop, pop, pop that people thought at first maybe sounded like fireworks before the horror of what actually happened came into focus. Let's go back to Martha Raddatz. Martha, I know you've been talking to sources here, and I gotta say, just it's one thing when we get the reports from law enforcement, but when you hear from a witness who witnessed someone die before their very eyes, it's a reminder of just how horrific and historic this event was today.
And how tragic. And I think most of us just saw what happened to former President Trump, and we're all thankful he is okay. But what happened in that venue, and hearing the story of that young soldier or military person leaping into action, which is not a surprise, going there for a jubilant celebration and having to deal with that kind of tragedy is sobering to us all. I do know that the weapon that the shooter apparently used was something that could be fired from 200, 300 yards away or even more, and could have been accurate. He very well could have shot more people. He very well could have killed former President Trump, even though he was 200 or 300 yards away, because that kind of weapon has that kind of range. We don't know yet whether he had a scope on that weapon or any sort of scope whatsoever. But even so, even just with the naked eye, he was clearly shooting within range of President Trump.
Yeah, still so many questions about how this played out, who this shooter was, the motivation there, and where the investigation goes from here. Martha Raddatz, as always, thank you. Let's go to Josh Margolin, one of our senior investigative producers, who's been getting new details from law enforcement. Josh, what are you learning?
With the key part of the investigation, a key part of the investigation will be on looking at where the shooter was, elevated position as Secret Service staff confirms. Elevated positions have long been perceived by law enforcement as a real risk to events, to people that gather. Look, just in recent years, we saw the Highland Park, Illinois mass shooting on July 4th, 2022. That was a shooter who was in an elevated position. Of course, the Las Vegas massacre, the worst mass shooting in American history. That was with a shooter who fired down from an elevated position on the Las Vegas Strip. And obviously we can't forget President Kennedy was killed by a gunman who was located floors above the motorcade that Kennedy was in when he was assassinated. Elevated position, the Secret Service prepares for this. So a key thing is going to be, how did this gunman get to the location? Why was that location available to that person?
Exactly, and I think obviously this is early on, and it's hard to ask some of these hypothetical questions now, but Josh, you know, like all the surveillance and the scanning of these areas that go into place before the event even occurs, the drones and the helicopters and devices up above, it's hard to imagine how something like this could have been missed from 200, 300 yards away, a rooftop elevated position. That will definitely be part of the investigation going forward.
Absolutely. And in fact, the Secret Service has already gone public during the January 6th committee hearings. There was testimony about the Secret Service. They know that people that come to Trump rallies sometimes come carrying weapons, not necessarily because they want to hurt anybody. People carry weapons, but you're not allowed to bring those weapons into proximity of the president, of the former president, of the candidate.
Josh Margolin, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Let's go back to Rick Klein, our political director, Washington bureau chief, who's there in Milwaukee. I just want to get more on your response, because it is hard to imagine how this week of the Republican National Convention is going to play out, business as usual or as planned. What are you learning about some of the adjustments or changes that could be made in the coming hours?
I was told just moments ago that there are no changes to the convention itself, but I would note that there is precedent for condensing a convention in the event that you need to. There have been times where major storms, either in a convention city or elsewhere in the country, have forced the cancellation of one night. There is plenty of wiggle room in a schedule like this to be able to do the convention business in fewer than the 4 nights that are now scheduled. But I am told that things are still on track as of this hour, although things are changing fast. But I would mention, just to understand what a convention is like, it's not just what goes on inside the arena itself. That's the main convention business. We're talking about dozens, maybe hundreds of other events throughout the weekend. John Carl's been reporting about things that are canceled tonight. Well, tomorrow night, there's a 15,000 person open air welcoming party for all delegates and invited guests. That is an enormous event, and it's an enormously hard event to secure. Similarly, you've got talking about breakfasts that happen around the city in hotel ballrooms and private residences. So many opportunities to worry about the security footprint that involve elected officials, maybe even the president himself or the former president or his vice president's running mate might be slated to attend things like this. So you have to think about not just the event itself, which is still on, but everything surrounding it. This was a city that was ready to celebrate this moment. It is now a city that is worried, concerned about this increased threat environment.
Rick Klein, thank you. Let's go back to John Carl, also there in Milwaukee. And John, picking up on that point, because this is not just known threats with security, right? It's anybody who could be motivated. We've talked about lone wolves and that threat in the past. It's somebody who may see an event that they saw and then be inspired to do something that can be almost impossible to plan for, especially when you have large gatherings of lots of people.
Yeah, and look, this was already a place that was going to be in lockdown for the next week. I mean, I am here just outside the convention center hall, and you can see, I mean, you can't see, but I can see right over here, the fencing that has been put up to basically secure this place, several block radius, basically already on lockdown, even though the convention itself doesn't start until Monday at 2 o'clock Eastern time. But they were preparing to keep this. I've been covering political conventions for a long time. Heightened security is not new, but there does feel to be something different already before this terrible event in Pennsylvania. A heightened sense of concern, again, given the threat environment, given the fact that death threats have become just a matter of course across in our politics. Political figures, public servants, journalists facing this kind of stuff. So there's, I can only imagine what the next few days are going to look like here.
And the next 24 to 48 hours, there could be some big changes, even though for now they appear to be staying the course with the plans John Carl, thank you. Let's go to our Chief Justice correspondent, Pierre Thomas. Pierre, you've been reporting on these threats for months now. Law enforcement, they've been aware, they've been worried about it. This obviously a worst case scenario as they are now investigating what appears to be a possible assassination attempt of a former president.
Indeed, we have a new statement from the Attorney General. He expresses his concern for former President Trump. He says his heart goes out to the victim, the spectator who died. He also issues a statement saying, quote, "We will not tolerate violence of any kind. Violence like this is an attack on our democracy. The Justice Department will bring every available resource to this investigation." And we have some more clarity now about exactly how this is going to unfold. The Justice Department's National Security Division, along with the FBI, will oversee this investigation with support from the U.S. Attorney's Office in Pittsburgh. So what that means is that this is officially being looked at as an assassination plot. Potentially that is going to be investigated until they can, as another source said, determine otherwise. That tells you the level of concern. Also, I'm being told by sources that law enforcement will be looking at security for all major public events, particularly those involving politicians, in the coming days. As you said, with the elevated threat environment has been of great concern by the FBI director, and sources within the Attorney General's office have been telling me repeatedly in recent weeks that the biggest concern he had going forward toward the fall was this spike in threats of political and the fact that also terrorism, ISIS, all these different things were surging at precisely the same time. That is the environment that we face ourselves with. And the other thing that's very important too, from a source I just spoke with, is that until they can get a definitive blueprint, understanding of who this suspect is, they are not releasing very much information because they cannot yet say that this is contained to only this event. They cannot yet say that.
Pierre Thomas, thank you. Let's go back to John Carl. I understand you have a new statement from the RNC.
Yeah, this is a joint statement from the Trump campaign and from the Republican National Committee, and we just got this in, so I'm going to be reading this to you for the first time here on the air. Statement from the Trump campaign and the RNC. As was communicated earlier this evening, President Trump is doing well and grateful to law enforcement and to first responders for their fast action. President Trump looks forward to joining you all in Milwaukee as we proceed with our convention to nominate him to serve as the 47th President of the United States. As our party's nominee, President Trump will continue to share his vision to make America great again. So the key line there is that President Trump looks forward to joining you here in Milwaukee to continue the plans for our convention. Nothing is changing here in terms of the convention going forward. In fact, an individual I spoke to who's been involved in the planning here said they were still working things out, but predicted the convention wouldn't just continue, but it will continue with a vengeance. I expect not just all 4 days of this convention to take place, but it to be a very energized convention and very much focused on portraying Donald Trump as somebody who couldn't even be stopped by an attempted assassin.
All right, John Carl, let's go to someone who knows a lot about Republican conventions, and Reince Priebus, our political contributor, who's also a former head of the RNC and former chief of staff at one time under Trump. Reince is joining us on the phone right now. First, Reince, can you just give me your reaction? What are you hearing from Republicans across the board?
Well, obviously, like everybody, it's just horrific and dreadful, and it's a sad day. Innocent person was killed, and maybe others. We just don't know the extent of this stuff, but it's just a sad reminder of how violent some people can be, and seemingly our inability to stop it. So it's all of those emotions all at the same time. So. And we're also gathered right now with, soon will be about 50,000 people in Milwaukee to celebrate our nominee and also celebrate our community in Milwaukee and in Wisconsin. And obviously it's tragic in a lot of ways. So I'm obviously grateful and I'm grateful that the guy was killed, but it's the whole thing is tragic. Lots of lost life and obviously just a lot of mixed emotions. Let me just put it that way.
Ryan, speaking of those mixed emotions, I mean, we've heard a number of statements from politicians on all sides of the aisle, most condemning the violence and saying that this can never stand. It should not happen. But we are also hearing some who are pointing the finger and placing blame. What's your reaction to that? Is there a place for that kind of conversation right now in this moment?
I don't think so. I mean, I think you have to think and you have to contemplate, and in the case of blame, I guess you can investigate what happened and why it happened, and I'm sure there's going to be a time for that, but I just don't feel comfortable getting into that right now. There's obviously sick people out there, and they don't care about life. They don't care about their own life. So don't care about your own life. You don't care about other people's lives. You get tragic results, and it's more sad, I think, than anything. I think that's probably the overwhelming feeling of most people.
Reince Priebus, thank you for your time tonight. We do appreciate it. I want to go back to John Santucci, our executive editor on investigations. And John, you've been in close contact with the Trump family tonight. They gave you some of the first statements directly about Trump's condition, that he was receiving medical treatment, that he's doing okay, he's doing fine. And also he claims that he was shot. That was a bullet that grazed the top of his ear. What more are they telling you tonight?
Yeah, well, first, a very rare public statement from Ivanka Trump. Of course, this was the only member of the Trump family that went to the White House with Donald Trump when he, of course, won and ascended to the presidency in 2017. Ivanka writing on Twitter with tonight, well, thank you for your love and prayers for my father and for the other victims of today's senseless violence in Butler, Pennsylvania. I'm grateful to the Secret Service and all the other law enforcement officers for their quick and decisive action today. I continue to pray for our country. I love you, Dad, today and always. That statement from Ivanka Trump posted to her Twitter account. Again, a very rare public statement for her daughter, because as we know, unlike her two brothers, being the three eldest children of the former president, they still seem very actively involved in Donald Trump's political life. Ivanka has really gone off into a private life with her husband, Jared Kushner. You mentioned with other members of the family I've spoken to, I did have a very brief exchange with Eric Trump. Of course, you'll recall from all of the trial that his father faced earlier this year, Eric Trump was pictured by his father's side in that Manhattan courtroom. We were, of course, in the Manhattan DA's case earlier this year. Eric Trump telling me that his father is the toughest man I have ever met, not elaborating on his father's condition, but nevertheless, right there in his father's corner, as he's, and of course, let's not forget also his wife, Laura Trump, as you well know, is now the second in command of the Republican National Committee. It'll be her first convention as number 2 for the RNC when that gets kicked off in Milwaukee on Monday. And finally, with ABC News first reporter I first spoke to right at the moment after this happened, Donald Trump Jr. Had told me via phone that his father has been in good spirits, that nothing was going to stop him. And of course, again, Donald Trump Jr., his brother's active by his father's side, but you have to recognize that Donald Trump Jr., of course, is really didn't want to continue the political mantle of his father. And it's actually a rare occurrence that the two sons, one or the other, was not with the president tonight in Butler, Pennsylvania. We know they have been very active present, whether it be in the courtroom or on the campaign trail with.
John Santucci, thank you. Let's go back to our chief White House correspondent, Mary Bruce. Mary, we know that President Biden is in Rehoboth, Delaware for the weekend, but he has been following developments briefed by his staff and the Secret Service. And then he came out before the cameras earlier today condemning the violence, saying that there's no place in America for this kind of violence. What more do we know about his activities tonight? We know that he did reach out to former President Trump directly.
He did. He's still trying to get in touch with the former president. We know that he reached out to him in a rare move. President Biden actually referring to his rival by his first name, saying he was trying to get a hold of Donald. The president coming out and forcefully condemning this kind of violence, saying it is sick, saying there's no place in America for this kind of violence. And it's one of the reasons that this country has to come together, one of the reasons why we have to unite the country, saying we cannot be like this. He said, a Trump rally should be something that is allowed to be conducted peacefully without any kind of problems like this. And while the president did refer to this as political violence, he did not go so far to call it an assassination attempt. He was asked that directly. The president instead saying that he had an opinion, but that he didn't have any facts. We know he continues to be briefed and updated by this. He has been briefed by the Director of Homeland Security, the Secretary of Homeland Security, the Director of the Secret Service, his Homeland Security advisor. He remains for now at Rehoboth, Delaware. He's there at the beach house, at his beach house for the weekend. He actually was leaving Mass when he learned of this incident. He was fully briefed and then wanted to come out and speak to Americans as soon as he could. This, there is no question, completely upends and changes this race. The president is now, and his campaign are trying to turn down the temperature. They're pulling down their political communications, pulling down their ads. It's not just, we've been talking about how this will or will not impact the Republican National Convention. This will also have a huge impact on the president's campaign as well. We'll be looking closely to see how he may be changing any of his upcoming events as well. He's supposed to be out on the road in Texas and in Nevada early on next week. Will any of that change? One of many remaining questions. But the president and many of those close to him, we have seen a slew of his cabinet officials and advisors coming out and calling to sort of dial down rhetoric in this country. One of the big remaining questions is whether that will happen or whether this incident will further divide this country.
And that will be a big test, Mary, we've been talking about. I want to follow up on that because while the president and his campaign, at least publicly, are talking about dialing down the rhetoric, we have seen some politicians out there already placing blame that would appear to only turn up the heat across the country. How is the Biden campaign, how are others who you're talking to responding to that sort of rhetoric?
You are already seeing those who are trying to politicize this. We have seen from some Republicans, including from J.D. Vance, who of course has been on the very short list as a possible VP pick for Donald Trump, coming out and suggesting that Joe Biden's rhetoric is partly to blame for this, noting that the president has been running a campaign very much centered on Biden's argument that Donald Trump is a danger to democracy. The president is trying, to use this as a moment to bring the country together. Of course, that sentiment is something that his campaign strongly disagrees with. But I think it is no surprise, given how divisive the rhetoric in this country is now, given how divided our nation is, that we are unfortunately seeing, just shortly after a horrific incident like this, that there are, efforts to politicize some of this. How this plays out, of course, remains to be seen.
This is such a pivotal moment in the campaign as we move towards the conventions and then the elections. It remains to be seen how the country will respond. Mary Bruce, thank you. I do want to bring in, we have some more eyewitnesses who were there at that event in Pennsylvania today. John Dohanish was there and is joining us now on the phone. John, if you can hear me, just walk us through what you saw and heard.
Hey, yeah. So, well, first, I just wanted to send out my condolences and prayers to the families of the victims. It was just crazy to just watch that so fast. I was going to jump right into it, right to when the shots happened. Trump started his speech, and immediately it sounded like what everyone's saying, like fireworks or firecrackers. And as soon as I heard the first one, I looked over. We were probably right in the middle of the stand if you're facing Trump. We were in the left section underneath the screen, right in the front row. I just saw the bullets hitting the stands, bouncing up. And I thought they were like the shells at first. I thought someone was right beside us. And then I heard the pause. There was the 4 shots, maybe a 5-second pause. And then the rest of the 4 shots that I then heard. And then all of a sudden I'm hearing everyone just screaming, get down, get down. I'm hearing get a medic. I'm seeing people with blood on them. I'm trying to help people get down. And I look up, I see the Secret Service gathering Trump immediately. Like I heard everyone saying, that was just highly impressive. But yeah, that was basically it from that. It just happened all so fast.
Sure, and John, again, as we've seen the video, it's really just a matter of seconds that all this was happening as the shots were fired, and you're there witnessing all of this in real time. Was there a moment when fear started to settle in, when you realized, oh, this is real, this is really happening, these are gunshots, and now I'm worried about my own safety and the safety of others?
So I wouldn't say fear, but definitely more concern for others because I was around a lot of more older people, so I was more worried about trying to get them down before I can get myself, because I knew I was going to, I have my faith in God, so I knew I was going to be okay, and I just wanted to help other people get down, and I had someone's, person with me. I was covering them. They were crying. I was trying to calm them down, help them keep calm. I told them just to keep praying, keep calm. I just kept telling them everything was going to be okay, but unfortunately for those two victims, or if there was more, I'm not sure, but yeah, tried my best.
Were you close to some of the victims?
Probably about 5 to 7 feet away from the one gentleman in the stands there, who I guess it was someone's father there.
And how quickly after seeing that victim did you realize that person was in grave danger? Was it immediate?
It was immediate. Like I seen, whenever I heard he got hit in the head, from what I heard, I seen someone else didn't give the signal that he didn't make it, and that just infuriated me. That just enraged me, and I just have a feeling that we're gonna come back and come out stronger than ever. I feel now.
And when you say that, of course, there's such a mix of emotions, right? You were there and you're still processing everything. But when you say we're going to come out of this stronger, what do you mean by that? You mean the country? You mean uniting?
Yeah. One, I feel like people are going to hopefully eventually start joining together and come out as one against the evil coming into the world or into our country, however you want to look at it like that. Stand up, I guess you could say.
John Johannes, we appreciate your time tonight, and we're thankful that you are okay and the people around you, and we're just so sorry, and our hearts ache for you and others who had to witness this horror, and of course the families of those who were killed and injured. John, thank you for your time.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Once again, for those of you who are just tuning in, we're coming to 10 p.m. Eastern time here at the top of the hour. We've been on this story for hours. I'm Wick Johnson in New York. We're following the major developments tonight after the shooting at a campaign rally for former President Donald Trump. This happened in Butler, Pennsylvania. On the right side of your screen right there, you're seeing the events play out in real time. It was a matter of seconds. The president described the incident on Truth Social a short time ago, saying that he was shot with a bullet that pierced the upper part of his right ear. And you can actually see in the video moments before he reached for his ear before he went down to the ground. He was then taken to a nearby hospital and is reported to be fine. The incident is being investigated now as a possible assassination attempt. Authorities say the shots were fired from a rooftop outside the venue from some 200 to 300 yards away. 8 rounds were fired from an AR-style rifle. The shooter was then neutralized, killed by the Secret Service. A second person, a bystander, is also dead, and we're told that 2 others were injured, and we're still awaiting more details on their conditions. Earlier this evening, President Biden came before the cameras condemning the violence, saying all federal agencies are engaged in this investigation. The FBI is taking the lead. They will, of course, focus on the shooter and the motivation, but also on the security measures surrounding the event. This horrific moment, loud popping noises, that's what we could hear in the video. That's what we've been hearing from witnesses. The former president, in the photographs you'll see, appear to grab his right ear. Secret Service agents then rushing the stage, protecting him with their bodies, crowding around the former president. Those anxious moments waiting to see if Trump was okay. And you can see that trickle of blood coming down in some of the images. Secret Service then helping Trump up with what appeared to be that blood around his ear, Trump pumping his fist, signaling to the crowd that he was okay. And we did hear some roars and cheers from the crowd when they saw that. Agents helping Trump to a vehicle. And once again, as he gets in there, acknowledging the crowd that was cheering him as he left. And then they take him off to the hospital. Of course, hundreds of supporters were there witnessing all of this, left shaken and in shock. The incident comes just 2 days before the Republican National Convention is set to start. Late this evening, the campaign and the RNC issuing a joint statement saying former President Trump looks forward to joining the convention. Apparently, it will go on as scheduled. And right now, here's ABC's Rachel Scott, who was at the rally in Butler when the incident occurred.
This is the shocking moment. Chaos erupted at Donald Trump's rally in Butler, Pennsylvania.
If you want to really see something that's said, take a look at what happened.
You can hear several pops. And see the former president grabbing his ear, ducking for cover behind the podium. Secret Service agents rushing the stage, surrounding Trump, shielding him, taking him down to the ground. The screaming crowd looking on in horror. A short time later, agents carefully lifting the former president up.
Let me get my shoes. Hold on to your head.
Blood clearly seen on his face, Trump pumping his fist. Agents whisking the former president off the stage, down the stairs, to a waiting armored SUV, rushing him to a local medical center.
We heard what we appeared to be gunfire coming. The former president was rushed off the stage right now. We're at Secret Service. He's being escorted into his vehicle. This was a chaotic moment that just played out right here in Pennsylvania. People running and rushing to the ground as they heard those apparent shots fired.
Then pandemonium, thousands of people running for cover. Tonight, the Trump campaign releasing a statement saying the former president is fine and being checked out at a local medical facility. Donald Trump Jr. telling ABC News he spoke to his father, who remains in the hospital, and described Trump as in good spirits, saying he remains under observations.
Just hours ago, this area was lined with Trump supporters. They entered that tent right there to be screened by Secret Service, going through metal detectors, their belongings tested. Now, this is the space where you have Trump supporters that are leaving, panicked and confused, as Secret Service agents rush us out of this area and back to our cars.
Tonight, the crowd still in disbelief.
Tell me what you saw and what you heard. You said that you heard the popping sounds when you got down.
So first you think like maybe firecrackers, but it continued, and then somebody yelled, get down. We got down, and we huddled, and we started praying.
Tonight, local officials telling ABC News their sounds were in fact gunshots. Live rounds fired from a rooftop adjacent to the venue outside the security perimeter. This is being investigated as an attempted assassination. And tonight, the local district attorney telling ABC News at least one person is dead, and the shooter is dead as well. Tonight, President Biden addressing the nation.
I have tried to get a hold of Donald. He's with his doctors. Apparently he's doing well. I plan on talking to him shortly, I hope, when I get back to the telephone. Look, there's no place in America for this kind of violence. It's sick. It's sick. It's one of the reasons why we have to unite this country. We cannot allow for this to be happening. We cannot be like this. We cannot condone this. But the idea that there's political violence or violence in America like this is just unheard of. It's just not appropriate. I mean, everybody must condemn it.
And moments ago, former President Donald Trump posting on Truth Social, thanking the Secret Service, saying, I want to extend my condolences to the family of the person at the rally who was killed, and also to the family of another person who was badly injured. It is incredible that such an act could take place in our country. I was shot with a bullet that pierced the upper part of my right ear. I knew immediately that something was wrong and that I heard a whizzing sound, shots, and immediately felt the bullet ripping through the skin. Much bleeding took place, so I realized then what was happening. God bless America.
And back out here, outside of where this rally took place just hours ago, we are just the last remaining network crew, and no one else is allowed in at this time. We know that behind me, where this rally took place, it's now an active crime scene. We have seen an increase in the amount of officials that have gone in. We've also seen people leave. We actually just spoke to one man who is a physician. He said that this was his very first Trump rally. He just spoke to the FBI about what he witnessed. He said he rushed to the aid of that bystander, of that attendee that ultimately was shot and later passed away due to his injuries. He said he was trying to do everything that he could to help. And I just want to move aside here to give you a sense of how this looks right now. Behind me where the lights are, that is where this Trump rally took place. And within minutes of the former president taking the stage, that's when we heard
the gunshots erupt. And something that's very striking, I will tell you, being here tonight, after witnessing the chaos and the panic that unfolded in those minutes, the terrifying moments for everyone that gathered here today, there is that image of the American flag, a strong reminder that even in these divided times, there is something that still unites us.
Absolutely, that's a great point. And Rachel, you've been there for hours in the stifling heat and witnessing all of this. You were inside when it happened. You were rushed out by law enforcement. And here you are once again. I do have a follow-up question for you, though. As you're sort of giving us the lay of the land here, we've been hearing from not only law enforcement about this other building that the shooter was apparently perched on top of, and we also heard from witnesses who said that they described seeing that location with canines and law enforcement scoping it out as they were being escorted out. Did you get any sense of where that was in relation to the venue where the shots were fired?
Yeah, you know what, I know that there are buildings that do surround this fairgrounds area, but I don't exactly know which building in particular many of those witnesses have been referencing. It was chaos in the minutes that followed, and we did see law enforcement officials, some with canines, sniffing some areas as it was being roped off. And then, of course, we were all sort of escorted out in those moments. So I can't tell you exactly what direction that building was located in. I've heard the same exact thing from several witnesses, in fact. And something that we do know is that this area behind me, no one is going out, no one is going in. We were live on the air as Secret Service moved all of the press out of that area as well. We were told at the time that we'd be let back in maybe within an hour or so to get the rest of our materials, some of our gear left inside, backpacks and personal belongings. All of that is now remaining inside as police continue to investigate what happened here hours ago.
We have so many of those witnesses you spoke with. They're going to need time to process and deal with the trauma and what they witnessed inside the bloodshed in that event today. Rachel Scott for us. We can't thank you enough. Thank you so much. We also have been speaking with, as we noted, a number of people who were there at that Trump rally inside, describing what they saw, what they heard, and some of it very disturbing. Let's take a look.
So I was positioned probably about maybe 20 feet away from President Donald Trump was making an address. I was to the right of the stage due to me being I was a speaker at the event. So I did my speech earlier today. During the pre-program, I was a few feet from where this all occurred. We heard the shots, and I thought it was, first of all, fireworks because, you know, people are on edge, and any kind of loud boom you hear, you know, it does have to do, especially because of the environment of what was going on. And I turned around, and someone yelled medic. And I looked, and there was no way a medic could have got to that person in time. So I left my seat, took my tie off, I jumped over the barrier, and I ran to the individual. But when I got there, it was too late. The person was bleeding out through their head. And I said, once again, respect to the family, because this is a very tough time. But they were shot, and I tried to, you know, block the road. I tried to hold, I held a towel against him, and until medical team arrived, they got him out, and, you know, from there I helped the police and crowd control with getting people out of there because people were very nervous, people were very hesitant, and we had to move people fast and get them into a safe location opposite where the shooter was at, or said to be at. So I assisted with getting people down and getting people out. And I try to keep kids calm and just get people clear.
Wow, Rico. Obviously, we want to be sensitive to the victim's family. Can you tell us more about this person, where they were? Was it a man? Was it a woman?
Well, it was a male. It was a male victim. He was literally just sitting there in the stands. He had to be maybe 3 or 4 rows up from the bottom of the bleachers where it was sitting. And once again, everyone was cheering and happy and listening to what Trump saying. And the next minute, he's gone.
Rico, did you have any training in this sort of like first aid? I mean, this is life-saving aid that you're describing here.
I mean, I'm in the military. I'm in the 171st Air Refueling Wing, and we learn first aid and self-aid body care and basic training. And at the point, as soon as I heard the shots and I seen and heard someone do a medic, my first instinct was, I'm trained in self-aid. I'm trained in applying a tourniquet, but I'm not trained to see someone's, what I witnessed.
I mean, nobody can be trained for that. And we're getting the sense of, not just from you, but from others, I think there's going to be some serious time, some healing that's going to need to take place for the people who are there and saw all of this, and especially for you to see everything up close. And you got the sense early on that that this person was lost.
From understanding head wounds and how they operate, when I seen what I seen, I was afraid that that person was lost. And reading what has been done, said, and stated in the news so far, those are now facts. What does it say?
Rico, I don't even know if these are the right words to ask this question, because most people have never been in this situation, but how are you processing what you saw and what you witnessed?
I mean, one can only process what happened, hopefully as slow as possible. But my worry, my heart at this point in time is not for myself, but it's for the families of the loved one.
We just saw him duck below behind the podium, and then a Secret Service pile on top of him. And we heard the shots.
More like what we heard, the bullets rattling around the grandstand, I hit this speaker tower, and then chaos wherever we hit the ground, and then police converted to the grandstand.
I watched him kind of graze his ear, and then I heard a pop, and then he went down, and then I heard another pop, and then a Secret Service kind of came up to the stage. I mean, it was just a chaotic scene.
See his face, he's right there talking, having a good time, and you heard one shot, two shot. It sounded like bang, nothing crazy, and then you heard maybe 3 or 4 more, and that's when everyone got quiet, started panicking. Trump dropped right to the floor. I guess Secret Service jumped on top of him and shielded him. But as soon as everyone in the crowd figured out what was going on, we all ducked, and my buddies just jumped on top of me, piled on top of me. And we had no idea what was going on. You're in total shock. You're shook, and you can't go to your legs. But we were trying to decide if we wanted to get up and run, and we had really no idea what to do. And next thing you know, you see bullets, or you hear bullets flying, and I believe a bullet hit the hydraulic lift that was holding up the speakers, and that thing almost collapsed. There was hydraulic fluid and water spitting everywhere all over the crowd. And then before you know it, everyone just gets up and starts running.
Oh, forgive me. I'm sorry. There's a little bit of a delay, but on that note about everybody getting up and running, we're actually showing video that you shot on your cell phone. And this is the moment of people running out of the venue. Describe what that was like, and when were you actually able to get out?
It was pretty stressful. I'm looking around trying to make sure my buddies who came with me were with me, and it took probably a good 10 minutes to get out of there, to get out of the whole area. And before you know it, there's ATVs and UTVs flying and ambulances and all that kind of stuff. And we're trying to figure out how to get out of there and get home. But we made it, and when we walked out to the road, they had police blocking everything off, and we actually found out where the building was that the shooter was shooting from. They had it all taped off. I guess it was like an agricultural warehouse, something like that. So it was pretty scary. It's like you're in the movies.
Stephen, forgive me again. I'm sorry. There's a little bit of a delay with the connection, but did you say that you were able to see the building that the shooter was allegedly perched on top of here? You said it was taped off by law enforcement. What did it look like?
It was like kind of like an airplane hangar, maybe, like a warehouse for agricultural equipment, I guess. ARC, AGC, something like that on the side. But once we were out, maybe 30, 40 minutes after, they were taking it off, investigating it, the dogs going and all that stuff. There was traffic jams everywhere. It was kind of hard to.
How far away was that area from where the former president was standing?
Maybe 300, 400 yards, maybe less, honestly.
And Stephen, when you hear that people were there in the crowd with you, other bystanders, at least one, maybe more, were killed, how does that make you feel?
Honestly, still kind of numb to it. It's hard to process all this. Your heart rate is through the roof, but that's what it's for their family, and they were supporting the country that they love. And in the meantime, it's definitely sad, and it's heartbreaking, honestly.
And Stephen, we've been hearing from people on both sides of the aisle, Republicans, Democrats, independent candidate, RFK Jr., and all with the same sentiment, condemning political violence, saying there's no place in this country for something like this. And I just wonder, from your perspective too, you're out there, you're exercising your right to support a candidate. What message do you have for people out there? Because the country is at this political boiling point. There's so much division and anger and hatred right now from one side and the other. What would you like to tell people?
At the end of the day, whether you're on the left, the right, the center, or you don't believe in politics at all, we all still put our pants on in the morning. We all breathe the air and go to work, and a lot of these issues, in 10 years, no one even thinks about them or cares about them. So we're all people at the end of the day, and it's not worth taking someone's life over political beliefs or whatever. It's just senseless.
Some really powerful words from so many witnesses that we spoke with throughout the course of the evening. We are getting some new information about the shooter now and the FBI's involvement in the investigation. Let's go back to our Chief Justice correspondent, Pierre Thomas in Washington. What more are you learning, Pierre?
But we've just been told that the FBI director, Chris Wray, has briefed the President of the United States, Biden. He also has briefed the National Security Advisor. We're being told now and can confirm that this dead suspect is a male. They will confirm that the dead suspect is a male. He was apparently killed. The early information is by a Secret Service counter sniper who honed in on him after the shots were fired. A Secret Service counter sniper killed the suspect. Also, we're being told that they are in the process of trying to verify the suspect's identity. They want to be 1,000% sure that they have the right name, that they can do this detailed background investigation that is now so critical for them to understand what this is and what the motivations might be. Until you can get the name really confirmed, you can't really do the appropriate social media. I'm told that there are more than one name that is being looked at in this situation. Again, this is an all hands on deck situation. The FBI director now personally involved. They have FBI just now on the scene, I'm being told, as we speak with, going through the evidence, trying to talk to witnesses, examining the area where the shooting took place. They are the lead. This is now a national security investigation of the highest priority.
And Pierre, I realize this is a fluid situation. You may not have the answer to this question, but I think because we've been on the air for hours, it's worth circling back to it. Is the belief still that there was a single shooter, or do we even know that at this point?
The information, the evidence thus far, single shooter, firing from the rooftop, as we reported, 200 to 300 yards away, using an AR-15 style rifle. The information we can now confirm is that the dead suspect is male, according to our source. They are now in the process of trying to make sure they have the proper identity, because everything flows from that. Who is this person? And then you can begin to piece together their recent life. They need to know everything, because that affects all of the security going forward.
And all of this with the caveat that information can change as we get more details from law enforcement. Pierre Thomas, thank you so much for that. Let's go to Aaron Katersky now, our senior investigative correspondent. Aaron, I understand that there was a potential photo of the shooter. Do we have that yet, or is there confirmation that it is in fact the shooter?
Well, the photo is from Getty Images, and law enforcement sources who have seen it tell ABC News that it does appear to be the shooter. So they are taking a look at this image, again, from Getty Images, and they are under the working suspicion that this is, in fact, going to be the shooter. Now, as Peter notes, they still have not shared a specific identity. They undoubtedly have a name that they're working with, scouring his background, talking to any known acquaintances or
Aaron, I don't mean to interrupt you. I just want to make clear to our viewers, because as you started speaking, there was a different photograph, but the photograph right now that is on the screen is the photograph that you were talking about. And once again, Aaron, if you can just describe what law enforcement sources are saying about this particular picture.
Yeah, the image comes from Getty Images, and it's being scrutinized by law enforcement officials now, but their working suspicion is that this appears to be the shooter. They have not released an identity, so they don't know for sure, but that is a working belief now of law enforcement officials that this image from Getty Images does in fact capture the person who may have tried to assassinate former President Trump at his rally earlier this evening in Pennsylvania.
Aaron Katersky, thank you. We're going to leave the picture up on the screen and go back to Pierre Thomas, because Pierre, I know you've been talking to your law enforcement sources. This gives us a clear picture of what we're dealing with. Again, we're hearing over the course through your reporting and others that the shooter was on a rooftop in a perched location 200 to 300 yards away from the venue, from the president. What does this tell us from your sources in terms of how this event played out and what this individual was able to do?
But what I can tell you for a fact, that image that we have up on the screen right now is being circulated by law enforcement. They have that image from Getty. They are circulating it. The operating assumption is that it was likely the shooter. This information, this image is being passed around through various law enforcement agencies for their evaluation. That image that we are looking at is an image that law enforcement has. They have control of the image. They're using the image to study it closely, obviously, and build from there. The other thing I can tell you is that this investigation now is of the highest priority. The FBI director directly involved in this case, and because from this particular shooting incident, it affects the entire threat environment, which we already said earlier, but was extremely elevated. People have been warning for weeks and months that the rhetoric in this country had produced a spike in political threats that no one can remember seeing in recent memory, period, full stop. The AG, very concerned about it from my reporting. The FBI director speaking over and over about his concerns about this particular moment. So right now, law enforcement across the country, we have a statement from the police here in Washington, D.C. A source just reached out saying that it will elevate security in Washington based on what took place as well. So this is, again, a moment where law enforcement is reevaluating everything.
Pierre, thank you. Let's go back to Martha Raddatz, because Martha, throughout the evening, there have been these developments as we've been getting more information. And one thing has really stood out to me is your sources. You've been speaking with military sources who early in the evening described what they heard of those gunshots and said that this was likely someone who fired from far away. And now we're getting more pieces to the puzzle here. And I just want to get a sense of your take on what you're seeing and what we're hearing from law enforcement now.
Exactly, and you have that elevated position that the Secret Service has talked about, that it was 200 to 300 yards away, and that the shots were fired from an AR-15. That is very similar to what the military trains on, the M4, and that can be really pretty accurate, especially with the scope, even that far away. Now, one of the big questions, and Pierre, of course, knows this well, is what the Secret Service does in a situation like this before all of this event happened. Do they go around the perimeter? I spoke just a few minutes ago with a former Secret Service agent who said the USS Secret Service counter sniper team covers the rooftops. They will survey buildings from 1,000 yards in. They will position based on the stage setup. There will be response teams, Secret Service and local police that will respond based on counter sniper calls to clear rooftops or to open windows. This agent said the perimeter on outdoor events varies. Clearly, there were rooftops around 200 or 300 yards away. That will certainly be a question that they look into in this investigation about why those particular rooftops were not spotted or cleared or what exactly happened. A sniper did take out that shooter, likely a Secret Service sniper taking out that shooter, but not before we had, as the Secret Service said, one spectator killed and 2 left in critical condition with.
And Martha, I want to hold this image on the screen right now for our viewers because, as we've been getting this report now that there was a counter sniper who took out the shooter, I don't have information on this photo, but it appears that this would be law enforcement taking up those positions. But Martha is still raising this massive question of how a rooftop within that perimeter that you described, may have been missed.
Well, I think it is almost impossible to cover everything with. It's something the Secret Service deals with all the time, and they bring in local law enforcement to that picture specifically that says police on the vest and Secret Service. That is clearly from the counter sniper team, someone from that team, whether that's the person who took out the shooter. We don't have that information, but it certainly could have been. And that person, that counter sniper person, was probably spanning around that perimeter. Again, this former agent saying this is just something they always do. They scan as much as possible, and heard those shots fired, heard multiple shots fired, and people hitting the ground, and I'm sure that sniper went into action.
Yeah, as many as 8 rounds from that AR-style rifle. Martha, thank you so much for your reporting on this. Let's bring in Don Mahalik from former Secret Service, who's a contributor now, has been speaking with us. Donald, I just want to get your sense of this information that we're getting now about the shooter on a rooftop taken out by a counter sniper. What's your take on this and how these events may have unfolded?
Well, it sounds like the Secret Service counter snipers did their job, as Martha was talking about. Whenever there's an event anywhere, the counter snipers go and they do their form of an advance. That form of an advance is looking at the entire area in and around the event space and setting up almost a grid pattern so they can identify locations and locations of interest. Looking and scanning all of those potential threat areas are part of what the counter snipers do, and they work with ground teams generally made up of Secret Service agents and local law enforcement called counter sniper response teams that they can call upon to respond to a potential situation and figure out what's going on. In this situation, it sounds like some of that was working. What we're going to have now is the FBI is going to do the criminal investigation piece of this to look at the shooter, his motivations, what happened. But you're also going to have the Secret Service now doing a mission insurance investigation to look at the protective venue, what protective methodologies were in place, what worked, what gaps they may have had, and what they can close down in the future.
Yeah, so much ground to cover and still so many details and questions left unanswered. Donald, thank you so much. We appreciate it. I want to go back to Aaron Katersky. Aaron, we've been, throughout the night, only had a few details about the victims in this case, confirming that at least one person had been killed, a bystander, and that as many as 2 critically injured. You're getting some more information about the victims now?
Yeah, we now know that 2 others are in critical condition tonight so this has had broader ramifications. Clearly, the attempted assassination of former President Trump is rightfully getting much of the attention, but there was a bystander that was killed, according to the Secret Service, and now we know from the hospital in Western Pennsylvania that 2 others have been critically hurt after this male gunman, who is still not been identified, fired from 200 to 300 yards away from an elevated position on a rooftop adjacent to the venue. He was able to fire off about 8 shots, law enforcement sources tell us, from an AR-15 style rifle.
So some of the images here coming in, law enforcement outside that hospital where we're told that some of the victims are being treated. Aaron, thanks again. Let's go back to Mary Bruce at the White House. More information from President Biden.
What we have now learned that the president has finally connected with Donald Trump. The two men have spoken. The White House, though, remaining tight-lipped on what was actually said on that call. They have not offered any kind of readout of this discussion, but we do know that the two have connected. These are not two men who speak often or really at all. Of course, the last time they saw each other was at that debate just a few weeks ago, but very little interaction then. We do know, of course, that the president earlier in the evening expressed how grateful he was to hear that Donald Trump was safe and doing well. He offered his prayers for the former president and his family at that time. We also now can report that the president is now he is now making his way back to Washington tonight. He will be leaving Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, where he was expected to spend the weekend. Those plans now changing. The president, we are also told, tomorrow morning here at the White House will be receiving an updated briefing from Homeland Security and law enforcement officials. The president has been being updated by his team, of course, throughout the evening. And we did hear him come out very forcefully earlier in the night and condemn this kind of violence, saying that it is simply sick, saying there's no place in America for this kind of violence. And he said it's one of the reasons why we have to unite this country. As we have said, his campaign is also trying to turn down the political temperature, the political rhetoric in this country by really hitting the pause button here. As would be expected, they are pulling down all of their political communications. They are trying to pulling down their ads as quickly as they can across the country that target Donald Trump in any kind of way, anything that is a political nature. Because this is a moment that shouldn't be about politics, and that is the message that we are getting from the White House and the president's campaign. We don't know yet if how this may affect the president's travel in the upcoming days. He's supposed to be in Texas on Monday, down to Nevada on Tuesday and Wednesday. Of course, he has been trying to pivot a lot of the attention back and a lot of the spotlight away from questions about the president's political future and back to Donald Trump's agenda. But now all of this, everything in this race has changed because of the horrific events of today. And the president now making his way back to the White House so that he can continue to be briefed and monitor this situation in the coming hours and daylight.
Everything has changed. There's no question about that. Mary Bruce, thank you so much. I do want to bring in Nathan Reidner, who was one of the spectators in the audience today at that rally in Pennsylvania. Nathan, forgive me, I know you've been waiting on the phone for a while as we've been getting this new reporting, but if you could just walk us through what you witnessed firsthand.
First, I want to wish my condolences on the victims. It is mind-shattering to go to a Trump rally and encounter and endure what has happened. I was seated in the left bleacher section of the rally. I was maybe 20 feet away from one of the victims. It was, at first, the noises we heard, it sounded like a firecracker, the little things you throw at the ground, usually around July 4th. But then once dozens of people, once I saw the dozens of people around me started dropping, you could tell things were very different. I looked at the stage, Secret Service to rush the president. People were terrified. It was, I know it's been about, probably close to 4 hours since the shooting, but
Ryan,
I'm a little bit of a loss of words.
I can imagine, as anybody would be, and we can hear that emotion in your voice, in real time as you're trying to think through what happened hours ago. One of the things that has been very difficult to watch is as we played this video back, former President Trump goes down, the Secret Service pounces on him, and the one thing that you do hear in the background is you hear that screaming as members of the crowd recognize that someone has been hit. You say you were 20 feet away from one of the victims. What did you see happen to that person?
I saw that people were trying to encourage them first after everyone dropped and after everyone at least thought that the threat was not immediate. People started moving away from the person to give them room so that they could be moved out. There was no medic nearby. You guys had Rico on earlier. I saw Rico afterwards. He had blood over his shirt. I took a photo. That's something I'm never going to forget. I will never forget that image. That I've been trying to help, but I'm someone who was encountering the unimaginable.
What does this say to you? And I know that these thoughts are raw. This is fresh in your mind. You're seeing these images on television and now trying to compare that to what you witnessed firsthand with your own eyes. But how would you characterize this state in this country right now?
I entered an interview in late May over the Trump verdict. And right now, things are deteriorating at an even more rapid rate than even most can imagine. I mean, everything we're going through in this election cycle is historic. I understand there have been some very contentious election cycles, like you look at 1968. I understand that some cycles are very contentious, but this absolutely is beyond the political impact that's going to have on Trump. This is a damaging image to the world. The man who is currently called to win the presidency, who I wish the best of recovery. Everyone turned on the news and saw that he had been shot in the head. It's a very scary image to send to the world. It's a very scary image to send to people. I was next to someone in the audience that was there with her young daughter. I was across the walking path of the stage in the other bleacher section. There was a young boy who was dressed up as Trump. I can't imagine the young people, the young children that were there watching the rally, seeing that. I can't imagine people watching at home and everyone just not knowing what happened.
Yeah, the children in the crowd. We heard from a local mayor, John David Longo, who was there with his pregnant wife and described, forcing her to the ground and then having to jump on top of her to shield her from potential incoming gunfire. Nathan, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you sharing your thoughts with us tonight.
All right, thank you for having me.
Thank you. Once again, our coverage does continue here, and I want to bring in Mark Updegrove, who's a presidential historian, joining us now. And Mark, I think it's worth picking up where Nathan, this witness, left off, talking about just the historic nature of this election cycle, unprecedented in so many different ways. This was a moment that many law enforcement officers had feared could happen. And here we are now, an investigation into the potential assassination attempt of a presidential candidate and former president. Put this into historical perspective for us. When was the last time we've seen something quite like this?
Well, first of all, I think it's a reflection of how divided and dangerous that political climate is currently. And Republican, Democrat, or Independent, we are all Americans, and this kind of political violence should have no place in American life. But unfortunately, as you are alluding to, it has in our past, in our recent past. In 2017, we had the shooting at a softball practice outside of Washington, and Representative Steve Scalise was hit. Gabby Giffords was hit in an assassination attempt in Tucson in 2011. Paul Pelosi, the husband of Nancy Pelosi, was attacked at Pelosi home in 2022. And of course, we've seen assassination attempts and assassinations of presidents throughout our history. Most recently, the assassination attempt on President Reagan's life in 1981, just 69 days into his presidency. We've also seen the assassination attempt of a contender for the presidency, George Wallace, the governor of Alabama, was gunned down in Maryland when he was campaigning as an independent for the presidency in 1972. So unfortunately, we have a long history of political violence, which, as President Biden suggested tonight, should have no place in America.
And Mark, what about as we're looking at all these horrible images, people are trying to look for some message of hope somewhere, right? There's multiple politicians on all sides of the aisle coming out condemning the violence, saying something like this should never happen. But when these events have happened in the past, what typically happens across the country in terms of a response, in terms of a recovery? Does peace often follow or not?
I think in the immediate days, there is a call for peace and there is a reflection of comity and civility and empathy. But I think that we get into debates about whether there should be gun control or gun reform in our country. And then the political divisions, once again, are sown. If you look back at the assassination attempt on President Reagan's life, America came together and you saw approval ratings for President Reagan soar in the wake of that. It actually helped President Reagan politically, and I think to some degree, Americans united when they saw an assassination attempt of their president. So I think it's a mixed bag. We saw the Paul Pelosi attack that I mentioned, which is the most recent of those that I enumerated. We saw more division. We saw more ugliness, particularly from the Republicans after that, really mocking what had happened to Paul Pelosi. So a mixed bag with, and again, I think a reflection of a very divided time in American life.
A mixed bag and certainly a test that this country will face in the days and weeks to come. Mark Optigrove, thank you so much for your perspective. We really appreciate it. I want to go back to Milwaukee because we've got our political director and bureau chief Rick Klein there, as well as our chief Washington correspondent John Karl. The two of you have had to go inside. There was some weather threatening your live locations. But again, all of this is happening right on the eve of the Republican National Convention, all of these events that were planned and the thousands of people that are expected to participate. What more are you hearing from your sources about what we can expect in the next 48 hours?
Well, the first thing we're hearing from RNC officials is that this convention is going on. I've got a statement that was just released by Reince Priebus, of course, the former chairman of the RNC, former chief of staff for Donald Trump, who is the chairman of the host committee here. He says, President Trump was in my prayers after surviving this assassination attempt. And he says, we are heartbroken that reports indicate at least one innocent person has been killed and perhaps others have been injured. This horrific violence has no place in America. But then this is the key line. Guests have already begun to arrive in Wisconsin, and we look forward to working with the Republican National Committee to welcome everyone to Milwaukee this week. This convention is proceeding as planned, and I think what you're going to see is this assassination attempt as something of a rallying cry for Republicans here. We're already seeing Republicans using the image of former President Trump with his arm raised and the blood coming down his face, used as a symbol, which I think is going to be a defining symbol for this convention.
And Rick, on that point too, obviously there's the rallying cry part of it, but also the rhetoric that we've seen. Some people, calling, condemning any sort of political violence, but then other people pointing the finger and placing blame.
Yeah, and the blame that has been directed particularly at President Biden himself has come from very high levels of the party, including Senator J.D. Vance, who in a couple of days could easily be on the ticket with Donald Trump. A lot of Republicans are saying something out loud that is right now, I think, probably not justified by any of the facts that are out there, in suggesting that some of the rhetoric that Biden has used somehow contributed to this. We just don't know anything about this gunman or enough about the gunman to be able to say something like that. And we are at a time where people need to be calming the tensions that are everywhere right now because they are boiling over. And I think John's right. This is going to be a rallying cry, and you're going to hear a lot of really sharp and really maybe even dangerous rhetoric in the coming days.
Rick Klein, John Karl, stand by. We'll come back to you in just a moment, but I do want to go back to Mary Bruce at the White House. You've been in close contact with the Biden administration tonight. The president has been talking to his advisors. He was briefed by the Secret Service. He spoke with former President Donald Trump. What more are they saying tonight?
It is notable that they are not saying much more about that conversation between the president and his rival, the former president. Just the fact that they spoke, though, is really remarkable when you consider, how rare it is. I mean, before the debate last month, it had been years since the two of them had talked, and even at the debate, they barely, I don't even think you could say, exchanged niceties. The president is now making his way back here to the White House. He's going to continue to be briefed by his team. He's going to have a briefing tomorrow morning with his national security team, continuing to try and keep a close eye on all of this. The question now, one of many, is what kind of impact this is going to have on the president's campaign. We are already seeing efforts by some just to sort of politicize this moment. Of course, as Rick notes, we have no idea what motivated or drove this gunman to do this. But you are already seeing many point the finger, or some pointing the finger at President Biden and his rhetoric. That is something, not surprisingly, that his campaign forcefully rejects. But how will this change the tone and tenor of this campaign in the coming days? Of course, as President Biden has been, under tremendous fire and fighting for his political futures. We have seen so many Democrats coming out and calling for him to exit this race. But for now, in this moment, the president is responding to this, as a president first, but also as a candidate. Of course, we are seeing his campaign pull down their political communications. We are seeing them pull down their political ads to focus on this moment, to try and dial down the temperature in this country and make the point that violence like this is simply unacceptable. As the president said, it is sick and has no place in America.
And John Carl, back to you there in Milwaukee with Rick Klein, because we know that the large crowds is something that Donald Trump obviously favors. It's a hallmark of his campaign. He wants to pack as many people in as possible. So I would imagine even the idea floated towards him that they would scale back the convention in any way is not something he wants. If he's able, he's going to try to be there.
I mean, I've witnessed Trump at rallies kind of call out the Secret Service and say, why are these barricades up there? I want to let people get closer to the stage. I was at a rally in Iowa during the 2022 midterms, where he actually got his staff to remove some of the barriers so more of the crowd could come closer to the stage. He's not going to want to scale back any of this thing. I was talking to one of the many people that are involved in planning here, not sure how this was going to affect the convention, as they were all scrambling to try to figure out what actually happened today and what the former president's condition is. But this person said to me, my assumption is not just that this convention will continue as planned, but this convention will continue with a vengeance, with a new energy, using this attempted assassination as a rallying cry, as a symbol, and certainly not as a reason to scale back any of the events here in the convention. Of course, the Secret Service is going to have other concerns. Law enforcement here is going to have other concerns about keeping this place secured. But as you and I talked about earlier, Whit, we are in one of the most secure places in the country right now. I mean, they've already erected barricades for blocks all around this convention center. There is already a massive security presence in the city of Milwaukee. It certainly isn't going to be scaled back. If anything, it's going to be ramped up.
And Rick, you and I were talking days earlier just about this event in Pennsylvania and how significant it could be. All eyes were on this event. There was, as names were being thrown out there for potential running mates, there was the possibility of at least a hint or a tease or maybe even an announcement. What does this do now to this Veep stakes, the potential running mates? And clearly some of them are out there on Twitter or X and making comments in support of the former president. Do you think this changes anything? Were any of them likely working to the last possible minute to get the job?
Yeah, we reported just hours before this rally in Pennsylvania that 3 finalists met with Donald Trump privately at Mar-a-Lago in the last couple of days. Somehow they avoided reporters who were tracking the movements of these individuals. We're talking about Senator J.D. Vance, Senator Marco Rubio, and the North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum. All 3 met with Donald Trump in a very small setting, maybe even as one-on-one type setting. For the first time in this process, he's talked to them informally, but to be involved in the interviews, he was clearly getting close to making that decision. He was teasing the possibility in fundraising appeals and in postings and in interviews that this would be the event. This would be the time that he actually announces his vice presidential pick. The timing would sort of fit going into the convention. We found out that he never had those plans, and he would hope to do this as sort of a big reveal on Monday at the convention. I think all the plans have to be a little bit up in the air. I would even say that if he hadn't made up his decision before, or his mind before, it may be that there's other factors that he is now considering, including how they're responding to this event that has upended so much about politics and so much about American political discourse in the last few hours.
Sure.
Patrick, I had actually heard from one of the former president's advisors about an hour before this rally was to get underway. We had received, and we've been going back and forth, are they going to announce it or are they not? Earlier today, we were told, no, he's not going to announce it at the event. But just about, less than an hour before the event, I got a call like, hey, you better be ready. We're hearing that, he may just do it. So there was a heck of a lot of anticipation at this event. Although, he didn't have the typical entourage with him of other officials, because so many people have already come to Milwaukee. We're already en route to Milwaukee. So a heck of a lot of the spotlight was very bright on that event in Pennsylvania today.
The spotlight bright on the event, and sadly, just a horrific scene that played out. And the former president, now injured and recovering, a slight injury, as he described, to the top of his ear following that attempted assassination. John and Rick, thank you. I want to go back to Martha Raddatz, because Martha, you've been following this very closely, talking to some of your sources, including military sources who've been sort of analyzing some of this data and information as it's been coming in. What more are you learning tonight?
Well, basically what they thought in the very beginning, it seems to have happened, that this was off-site, that it was not in a secure area. It was off 200, 300 yards away from the actual event, away from Donald Trump. But the shooter still managed to fire 8 rounds from an AR-15. I think about that crowd, and that crowd was there for a political event. The campaign will surely go on. The election will surely go on, but no one will forget this day. We have to remember that this is a day where someone tried to assassinate a former president and a presidential candidate. And in that assassination attempt, killed one of those supporters at that political rally and left 2 others in critical condition, according to the Secret Service. So I think that is really what we have to think about tonight. The campaign will go on. Donald Trump made that very clear, just putting that fist up. It looks to me like he was saying, fight, fight, as he was helped off the stage there. He will certainly, as John and Rick said, talk about that this week. They will talk about this at the RNC. But hovering over all of this is, who is that suspect? What motivated him? Why would he take action like that? And because that suspect is dead, you can imagine that there will be conspiracy theories for a very long time, no matter what they find out and prove.
Yeah, sadly, there's no question about that. Martha Raddatz, thank you. Just to point out to our viewers, some of this video that you're seeing, these are new aerials from our affiliate there that has been following this scene, this chopper video. This is overlooking the area off in the distance. There was a wider shot that you could see the American flag that was hanging. There it is. That was the venue inside. But again, law enforcement saying that this shooter was perched up on one of those rooftops about 200 to 300 yards away. And now for the first time, it's kind of coming into a clearer picture that just how much space there was. There are a number of buildings there where he could have been. Once again, we're still just getting these details coming in about the investigation, attempted assassination of the former President Trump. Before we go, though, we do have a recap of all the troubling developments on this historic day. ABC's Rachel Scott was there at the rally and has been speaking with eyewitnesses who were there too.
This is the shocking moment. Chaos erupted at Donald Trump's rally in Butler, Pennsylvania.
If you want to really see something that said, take a look at what happened.
You can hear several pops. And see the former president grabbing his ear, ducking for cover behind the podium. Secret Service agents rushing the stage, surrounding Trump, shielding him, taking him down to the ground. The screaming crowd looking on in horror. A short time later, agents carefully lifting the former president up.
Let me get my shoes. Hold on.
Blood clearly seen on his face, Trump pumping his fist. Agents whisking the former president off the stage, down the stairs, to a waiting armored SUV, rushing him to a local medical center.
We heard what we appeared to be gunfire coming. The former president was rushed off the stage right now. We're Secret Service. He's being escorted into his vehicle. This was a chaotic moment that just played out right here in Pennsylvania. People running and rushing to the ground as they heard those apparent shots fired.
Then came the pneumonia, thousands of people running for cover. Tonight, the Trump campaign releasing a statement saying the former president is fine and being checked out at a local medical facility. Donald Trump Jr. telling ABC News he spoke to his father, who remains in the hospital, and described Trump as in good spirits, saying he remains under observations.
Just hours ago, this area was lined with Trump supporters. They entered that tent right there to be screened by Secret Service, going through metal detectors, their belongings tested. Now, this is the space where you have Trump supporters that are leaving, panicked and confused, as Secret Service agents rush us out of this area and back to our cars.
Tonight, the crowd still in disbelief.
Tell me what you saw and what you heard. You said that you heard the popping sounds when you got down.
Sounds. At first you think like maybe firecrackers, but it continued, and then somebody yelled, "Get down!" We got down, and we huddled and we started praying.
Tonight, local officials telling ABC News those sounds were in fact gunshots. Live rounds fired from a rooftop adjacent to the venue outside the security perimeter. Tonight, law enforcement recovering an AR-style rifle. This is being investigated as an attempted assassination. And tonight, the local district attorney telling ABC News at least one person is dead, and the shooter is dead as well. A law enforcement official briefed on the investigation tells us this image is believed to show the suspected gunman on the roof. Tonight, President Biden addressing the nation.
I have tried to get a hold of Donald. He's with his doctors. Apparently he's doing well. I plan on talking to him shortly, I hope, when I get back to the telephone. Look, there's no place in America for this kind of violence. It's sick. It's sick. It's one of the reasons why we have to unite this country. We cannot allow for this to be happening. We cannot be like this. We cannot condone this. But the idea that there's political violence or violence in America like this is just unheard of. It's just not appropriate. Everybody must condemn it.
And moments ago, former President Donald Trump posting on Truth Social, thanking the Secret Service, saying, "I want to extend my condolences to the family of the person at the rally who was killed, and also to the family of another person who was badly injured. It is incredible that such an act could take place in our country. I was shot with a bullet that pierced the upper part of my right ear. I knew immediately that something was wrong, and then I heard a whizzing sound, shots, and immediately felt the bullet ripping through the skin. Much bleeding took place, so I realized then what was happening. God bless America."
And Rachel Scott is back with us now. She was there at that rally in the beginning. She is still there now. Rachel, you've talked to a number of witnesses, but I also wonder, have you been in touch with the Trump campaign? Some of the officials that you were likely speaking with who were there at the event and then fled with the president. Are they revealing anything else about what happened?
Yeah, there is a sense of shock among Trump officials as well. They were inside of this rally along with us and the former president's supporters, members of the press. They were there too, also diving for cover, many of the former president's aides, when we heard those gunshots erupt and the panic that set in and the chaos that occurred just right after that. Here now, right behind me, is this active crime scene that you have here. And there were a number of people that were here. Their belongings are left inside. It was sort of this moment where you took what you could and you just sort of raced out. There were some people running out. There were some people that had to be pushed out by Secret Service. They were told to just take what you can and leave everything else. There were probably about a dozen people that were lined up here at these gates behind me asking law enforcement when they'll be able to get back in. They were just told that they would not have access to their personal belongings for some time, maybe a couple hours, maybe a day. There are several people here who actually have their keys to their cars. They can't drive home at this point. Obviously, this is an active crime scene that's occurring behind me here tonight. And so you have this American flag that's hanging over that crime scene, an attempted assassination of a former president, a Republican nominee in this race. It is an unprecedented twist to an already historic campaign win.
Rachel Scott, stand by. Just reminding our viewers who are tuning in right now as we hit the top of the hour, it is just past 11 o'clock at the east, 8 o'clock in the west. We've been on this for hours now. I'm Wood Johnson in New York, following the major developments. Former President Donald Trump in an attempted assassination at one of his events in Butler, Pennsylvania. He was there for a rally, a political rally. You see the events here. There are the popping sounds in the crowd, the former president reaching for his right ear before going down to the deck right there on the stage. The Secret Service surrounding the former president, jumping on him to protect him, forming somewhat of a human shield there. before eventually bringing former President Trump back to his feet and escorting him off the stage. You can also hear the screams from the crowd, because as we know now, that there was a shooter who was perched on a rooftop, fired up to 8 shots from an AR-style rifle, and at least one spectator, one person in the stands there, was killed. We know that 2 others were taken in critical condition to a nearby hospital. The former president was also escorted, as you can see in some of these images. Once they got him back to his feet, they escorted him off the stage. And in some of the pictures, you can see that blood trickling down the right side of his face. The crowd responding to Trump when he got back to his feet and started cheering. The former president then walking off with the Secret Service, as you see here, ultimately into a car being escorted off to a nearby hospital. We're told by family that the president is doing fine tonight, that he did suffer a minor injury as a bullet passed through the top of his right ear. But the president and his family, they've been asking for prayers for the victims who were killed, and also thanking the Secret Service for their quick actions in this assassination attempt. We also know that the Secret Service is involved in the investigation, the FBI now leading the investigation. We've been getting information about the shooter. They have confirmed that it's a man. They believe at this point it's a lone suspect. No indication that anybody else was involved, but that man was perched on a rooftop some 200 to 300 yards away from that venue. Once again, with an AR-style rifle. We're going to bring in some of our other correspondents and contributors here in just a moment. Forgive me, I'm getting instructions. I can't do that. You've got to keep moving it forward. Okay. We've been speaking with eyewitnesses all day. Let's go ahead and listen.
Tell me what you saw and what you heard. You said that you heard the popping sounds when you got down.
Sounds. At first you think like maybe firecrackers, but it continued, and then somebody yelled, "Get down!" We got down, and we huddled, and we started praying, and we just started praying, and thank